it says, shun evil and do good. And she felt as if we just concentrated on that line, that it would help us get through this difficult time in our lives and get through the high holy days. What she didn't know is that I have Psalm 34 written on every talit that I've had for 20 years. And it is David singing at a difficult time in his life, calling out to God, and what it means to be in awe of the Creator. So I'm just going to read to you what's written here and then go on for her part. It says, who is the person that is eager for life, who desires years of good fortune? Guard your tongue from evil, your lips from deceitful speech. Shun evil and do good. Seek peace and pursue it. And if we do that, the next line is the eyes of God are on the righteous, and God's ears are attentive to their cry. If we can bring our energies towards goodness tonight and peace and love, that is how God can rest with us this evening. So tonight, perhaps we begin by reminding ourselves that we have a thirst for life and that we have a yearning of goodness inside of us, and we have a desire for life in this world without evil. Maybe tonight we can begin a return to those values that we know are the central core of who we are as a people. And I imagine it's the same core that's in each and every one of us sitting in this room tonight. To live, to love, to do what is good, to be kind. We have a lot of work to do over the next several weeks. Let's begin that work together now.
Rabbi. Oh, yeah, it is now. Rabbi Aaron talked about the work that we have ahead of us. And on the one hand, it is communal work. We don't all have to hold everything ourselves. But on the other hand, it is deeply, deeply personal work. And it is work known in our tradition as cheshbon nefesh. And modern Hebrew speakers will know when you ask for a check at a restaurant in Israel, you say, cheshbon bevakasha, can I have the bill? Can I see that itemized list? And I think about that a lot when I think about cheshbon nefesh, right? This idea that I'm going to sort of go through this itemized list of my intentions. Did they match my actions? I know I'm short. Thank you. Oh, thanks. Maybe that's all right. Yeah, exactly. Perfect. And some of you have heard me teach this. One of my favorite images of these high holy days that our rabbis give us is that they imagine that even though we often think of Yom Kippur as the stricter of our two holidays, the rabbis actually teach, right, that it's Rosh Hashanah that is Yom Hadin, the day of judgment. And one of the images they give is that God sits, and there's lots of theological challenges with it, so just go with me. But God sits on this throne of judgment on Rosh Hashanah. And the text teaches that it is our prayers, and especially the sounding of the shofar, that convinces God, if we do it from our deepest soul, from that nefesh that we've spent this time working on, if we do it from there, it says God gets up and moves from the throne of justice to the kisei rachamim, to the throne of mercy. And that idea of us influencing God, I think, maybe feels particularly powerful this year when it has felt like such a hard year. And so I actually wanted to open with words from a colleague, Rabbi Evan Schultz, who wrote this beautiful piece that to me spoke a little bit about our work of Cheshbon HaNefesh this year, of what it might mean to do this accounting work this year. And he writes, I scheduled a morning meeting with God. Subject, role clarification. God was 5 minutes early. I was 5 minutes late. My youngest missed the bus. God seemed agitated. What's this about? Role clarification. We humans feel like we're shouldering a lot of the load these days. We need some help. God burst into tears, a daily occurrence. You cover the earth, I cover the sky. Haven't we been over this? God replied as she stared out the window. Well, it's not working very well, I replied, as I tried to discern what God was staring at. God was silent for what felt like an eternity. I can't heal the sick or stop wars. I cannot prevent evil or calm the seas. I cannot change hearts or bring peace. I can pray for you and send angels to earth. I can offer you strength and cry for you. I can craft beautiful skies and incredible sunsets, and I can believe in you. Then I burst into tears, a daily occurrence. And so in these days, as we try to shift God from this throne of judgment to the throne of mercy, it's also time to think about God believing in us and the work we need to do to shift ourselves in one direction or another. So I'm going to turn it over to my colleague. One of the mantras actually that we give throughout these days leading up to Rosh Hashanah in this month of Elul, which is so close to its end as you can see in the moon in the sky, is Psalm 27, which gives us maybe a vision for what that journey of Cheshbon HaNefesh can look like.
אחת שאלתי מאת אדוני אותה אבקש. אחת שאלתי מאת אדוני אותה
So if you're comfortable doing so, I want to invite you to just plant your feet right on the ground. We're just going to take a few moments for reflection and meditation. If you want, feel free to go into one of the aisles. You can get comfortable on the floor if you prefer that, or just sit in your chair and both feet firmly on the ground. Think about being rooted in the chair. And as you're comfortable, you can close your eyes. And as we begin that process of reflecting on the people that we were in the year that passed, this process of cheshbon hanefesh, I want to start by inviting you to think about a moment that you look back on with pride. Maybe it was a personal interaction that was difficult, and as you reflect on it, you feel really good about the way you handled it. Maybe it was a hard conversation you had to have with a friend or a colleague, a parent or a child. As we count the ways we fell short, we also need to number the ways that we exceeded our own expectations perhaps, or at least met our high standards. So take a moment to think about something that happened in 5784 that gives you a sense of pride. Think about some of the values and qualities that inspired the words that you shared or the way that you behaved. Was it compassion? Was it having a measured sense of the situation? Was it your capacity to listen, to try to understand? Was it your ability to control your emotions? Think about ways you might take some of those values into 5785 so that the next time you have one of those challenging moments perhaps, maybe one that you hadn't planned for, one that just presents itself, you can go back to those values and you can create a moment in 5785 that you'll look back on at next year's Selichot with pride. And now take a moment to think of something that didn't go the way you wanted it to. A time that you lost your temper with someone dear to you. Perhaps it was a sin of omission. A time you failed to reach out to someone you love. You failed to be there for them or say something compassionate when it was called for. Think about a moment of failure in 5784. And as you reflect on it as honestly as you are capable of doing, think of some of the values that might have been absent that caused that moment of failure. Was there a lack of compassion? A failure to seek to understand? And maybe there were other values that you wish not to carry into 5785 that inspired that behavior. Anger, righteous indignation, hypocrisy. Perhaps just being inconsiderate. If there are amends that need to be made, make the commitment to do so before Rosh Hashanah arrives next week. Call that person that you failed. Call that person you let down. Seek their forgiveness. And also try to find the way to forgive yourself. Not to excuse the behavior, but so you don't have to carry the hurt into the new year. Instead, you can just carry the lesson. Let the past go, but keep the values that can help you from making that same mistake again. Keep those with you and carry them into the new year. And the final act of Cheshbon HaNefesh for tonight is to think about the way that you can provide another with slicha. Maybe there's someone who really failed you in this past year who hasn't yet come to you to ask forgiveness. Might you be brave enough to reach out to them and tell them before the new year is upon us, I want you to know a way that you let me down. I want you to know how you hurt me in this past year. I hope you will try to make amends. But even if you don't, I feel obligated to tell you how your behavior made me feel. And if there's someone who let you down, who did apologize to you, and you haven't had the chance to accept that apology, or at least to have that conversation, to follow up on what happened, help them in the process of Cheshbon HaNefesh, and commit to having that hard conversation before the dawn of the new year. We know that sins we've committed against others are only forgiven when we ask for their forgiveness, when we make restitution, when we vow not to make the same mistake again, and when we change our behavior and become a new person. And the sins that we've committed against God, those are sins that sincere acts of repentance during these Aseret Yemei Teshuvah, they will effectuate God's forgiveness, but we need to do the work. And so throughout this evening, I invite you to think of ways that you perhaps let yourself and God down spiritually. Ways that perhaps you let yourself and God down in your failure to try to be your very best self even when no one was looking. And perhaps there are ways in the year that passed that you feel like you let down your community. And so how can we do better by others, by God, by our community in the year to come? Take one more minute to reflect on any of these things as we do the work of Cheshbon HaNefesh.
Rabbi Joel Nickerson, Rabbi Leah Fine from Wilshire Boulevard Temple. We're going to pass a sheet out. We're moving from Cheshbon HaNefesh into Selichot and Tshuva, and we thought tonight we could do a little bit of studying together. We're studying our souls and we're doing our internal work, but it's also nice for us to learn together. So that's so much of the work that we have to do to repair ourselves requires us being in relationship with others. So I'm going to read this text out loud. This is one of my favorite stories from the Talmud. And then Rabbi Fine will explain what comes next. Okay? So we should have enough copies. And if you don't have a sheet as I start reading, you'll get it soon enough. Okay? So this is from the Babylonian Talmud Ta'anit. And it goes, our sages taught, a person should always be soft like a reed and not be stiff like a cedar. An incident occurred in which Rabbi Elazar came from his rabbi's house, and he was riding on a donkey and strolling on the bank of the river. And he was very happy, and his head was swollen with pride because he had studied so much Torah. On his way, an unusually ugly man came along. The man said to Rabbi Elazar, greetings to you, my rabbi. But Rabbi Elazar did not return his greeting. Instead, Rabbi Elazar said to him, worthless person, how ugly you are. Are all the people in your city as ugly as you? The man said to Rabbi Elazar, I do not know, but you should go to say to the craftsman who made me, how ugly is the vessel you made. When Rabbi Elazar realized that he had sinned and insulted this man merely on account of his appearance, Rabbi Elazar descended from his donkey and prostrated himself before the man. Rabbi Elazar said to the man, I have sinned against you. Forgive me. The man said to him, I will not forgive you until you go to the craftsman who made me and say, how ugly is the vessel you made. Rabbi Elazar walked behind the man, trying to appease him until they reached Rabbi Elazar's city. The people of his city came out to greet him, saying to him, greetings to you, my rabbi. The man said to them, who are you calling my rabbi? They said to the man, this person who is walking behind you. The man said to the townspeople, if this man is a rabbi, may there not be many like him among the Jewish people. The townspeople asked him, why do you say that? The man said to them, he did such and such to me. And they said to him, even so, forgive him, as he is a great Torah scholar. He said to them, for your sake I forgive him, provided that he accepts upon himself not to become accustomed to behave like this. Immediately, Rabbi Elazar entered the study hall and taught, a person should always be soft like a reed, and he should not be stiff like a cedar, as one who is proud like a cedar is likely to sin. And therefore, due to its gentle qualities, the reed merited that a quill is taken from it to write a Torah scroll, tefillin, and mezuzot.
In a moment, we'll ask you to turn to somebody next to you to find a learning partner, find a chavruta, with whom you can discuss more about this story. If you look at the bottom of the second page of the handout, you'll see questions to guide your discussion of the text in chavruta. The first question, how do you think each individual missed the mark in this story? How do you think the community missed the mark in this story? The second, what led Rabbi Elazar to realize that he said something he probably shouldn't have? How can that realization relate to our own lives? Number three, do you personally feel satisfied with forgiveness at the end of the story? And number four, what do you think is the lesson of this story? So turn to somebody sitting next to you, find a chavruta, find a study partner.
Or 2 to 3 people.
Or 2 to 3 people around you. Introduce yourself, say Shavua Tov and Shana Tova, and then we'll come back together.
You have about 7 minutes. You figured it all out? Did you figure it out?
If you're going to tell someone they're ugly, don't say it to them.
we'll skip right to the lesson. We'll ask a couple people what their lesson is.
Great.
And then you share your thing, I'll share my thing.
Perfect. Great. This is the easiest thing I've ever done since I started. Yeah. I love it.
It's the last.
Yeah.
She wrote the meditation. Give her the
I don't.
Take a breath
I know.
before we go into
She didn't write the
craziness.
meditation, but was her idea.
That's true. I don't do
Do you know Michael Cherick, HCC in New York? So when he taught me this story, so I'll give you the very quick. So how does it start? It includes a detail that seems to be superfluous. It says, Maaseh Sheba Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon Mimigdal Kedor Mibeit Rabbo Vaya Rochem. Okay. Matea Al Svat Nahar. Why does it tell you that? I mean, why, right? So it's not important. Because what do you see if you're walking on the river? When you look into the river, you see yourself. So then when it gets to that part where you don't know who he's talking to in the Hebrew, it's because he's talking to himself. So he says, I'm ugly, I'm stupid, I'm not worthy of being a rabbi. It's imposter syndrome. So, but then when he gets there, they say, Rabbi, and he's like, I'm not a rabbi, I'm just some schmuck. So you know who Elazar is? Elazar's Rabbi Shimon's son. He is a schmuck. His father was the greatest rabbi of the generation. And Elazar.
His father was also a lunatic.
His father was a lunatic, but they called him Chometz Ben Yain. So like, he has this imposter complex. So anyway, Michael Chernick taught this to fourth year and fifth year rabbinical students.
You are all.
And he didn't say it that way. But when he said, why is he walking in the river? We were all like, I don't know. And then he said, like, okay, so what do you see when you're in the river? Like, you see yourself. And it was like, oh my God, that is me. I am the Mechoar. Happy.
3 more minutes. 3 more minutes.
No, the translation's great. Yeah. The only thing I would do differently is I do think it's intentionally confusing. But I do think it's intentionally because like who is the ugly one? Like because you could argue even if he's not wrestling with himself, you could say like he was really rude, so Elazar's in the wrong. On the other hand, the other guy won't forgive him, so he's in the wrong. Like you should like someone said something that's regrettable, and then they're like, it wasn't like it came out all wrong. But please forgive me. And then you're like, nope. And then I come back, I'm like, I'm really sorry. And you're like, nope. I mean, like, it's a bit much. Yeah, it's too much. But you're right, we should teach you.
What?
I'll start singing.
Yeah.
Right?
That when they hear the nigun.
Yeah, they will. Tali, you can slowly, softly.
So wrap up your thoughts. It's okay if you didn't figure everything out.
sing. You can't talk and sing ah at the same time. Ah, ah, ah. One more time. Ah, ah, ah.
Let's take a few brief responses from people who want to give their perspective on any one of the 4 questions we asked. We won't limit it, but if anyone, yes. Stand up, say your name, and share what stood out to you.
Okay. Hi, I'm Talia, and in our group we were wondering why he never directly apologized and asked for forgiveness directly from the gentleman that he insulted.
Okay. Great. Yes.
Thank you for inviting us here. A group of us are from Wilshire. My name is Melanie Alkov, and I have a lot of thoughts about this. My first thought was rabbis are not perfect. And maybe people don't always realize that. I hold my rabbis in really high regard, but they're human beings too. I think one question that we all had was, why were the townspeople so committed to saying that this rabbi is a Torah scholar? Why were they, so, for me, he's a Torah scholar. He probably never did wrong. So I wanted to ask that question from maybe Rabbi Nickerson.
This is interesting. These are becoming more questions than interpretations, but well, maybe we'll get to that. Okay, yes. A very good rabbinic thing to do, take the question best. But I want to get a few more responses before we offer our own thoughts.
I'm Sharon Baumgold from Temple Emanuel. Welcome, everyone. I'm so glad to see so many people from other temples. Shana Tova. So my question is, generally, when I've studied Talmud, all the Torah scholars are like, they're the very height of everything, and that's the biggest and best and brightest you can be is a Torah scholar. And here, I think it's very telling that a Torah scholar, especially one so prominent, would be used for this very essential lesson that, as one person said, you really need to think before you speak. If a Torah scholar needs to do that, how much more so does a person who is not a Torah scholar, who's an ordinary person, and that you really need to be careful when you look only on the outside of someone and not to see how they are inside.
Thank you very much. Okay, we'll take a few more.
Another Temple, I'll stand up. Another Temple Emmanuel person. So really great to see all our community. So, was Nancy. Yeah. So Nancy Lee. So we were struck by the arrogance in answering these questions, this theme of arrogance. This Torah scholar had just come. His head was so full and he was like, oh wow, I studied Torah, but that doesn't give him the license to offend and hurt somebody else. So as Paul very well, very aptly said, live your values. With the theme of forgiveness, that's left ambiguous, the question on that, because as the recipient of the insult had said, well, I'll forgive him if he changes. We really don't know if that change is going to happen. So, yeah, that was.
Great. All right, 2 more. Go ahead, Scott.
Hi, my name is Scott. I am from Wilshire Boulevard Temple as well. Something that I noticed was initially when the rabbi tells the man that he has done something wrong, he only says, I have sinned against you. And that's kind of meaningless if you think about it, because it doesn't acknowledge anything specific. He doesn't say, oh, I called you ugly. He said, I sinned against you. And it's very impersonal. And I suppose that's just a very inauthentic way of seeking forgiveness. And as long as the rabbi never actually acknowledge the very specific sin that was committed directly at the person, then it's not authentic forgiveness that he's seeking. It's just, placating the man.
Yes, last one.
Hi, I'm Flora, and our group talked about the fact that just because somebody is a scholar does not make them a rabbi. There is more to it than that. And I think that, of course, at that time, that's what was done. But we need to realize that there's more than book learning. And we learn from our parents, and we learn from our friends, and we learn from others how to treat other people.
Thank you so much. I think the perfect rabbi from Stephen S. Weiss wanted to share something. Is that correct? Go ahead.
So I had shared with, hi, I'm Yoshi. I had shared with Leah a teaching, one of my teachers, Rabbi Michael Chernick, taught me when I was in rabbinical school, so this is his interpretation, not mine. But he pointed out to us this beautiful detail at the beginning of the story. It tells us, and whenever there's a detail in a short story like this, I mean, this is a movie, but it's just, 5 paragraphs. And in such a short story, to have any details, we should really look very carefully at them. So it says he was riding on his donkey and strolling on the bank of the river. So why does it give us that detail? So Rabbi Chernick asked us to think about, what do you see when you look into the river, when you're walking alongside it sometimes? You see yourself. So one way of looking at this story is that it's really a story about the ugliness we see in our own selves and our own inauthenticity. Oh, yeah. Rabbi Chernick. And an imposter complex. So he taught it to us in the context of being rabbinical students. And Elazar has just left the house of his rabbi. He's just been ordained. And he's feeling great. And then he sees himself in the river and he's like, oh, I'm just a schnook who doesn't know much, and now I'm going to go there, and they're going to figure it out right away. And then he gets there, and they call him rabbi, and he's like, who are you calling a rabbi? I'm barely a rabbi. And they say, yes, but for us, be a rabbi. So I think in different contexts, we could look at that and think about the ways that sometimes we're overly harsh on ourselves, and all we see is the ugliness inside of ourselves. And there is ugliness, but we should also see the beautiful parts too.
Thank you, everyone, for your responses. One of the reasons,
Oh, one more. Okay.
Hi. Thank you. My name is Donica, and I guess I want to piggyback on Yoshi, what Yoshi just said about the beauty in people, because we might assume that the rabbi may be the most beautiful and the ugly person may be the least beautiful, but what stood out to us in this passage is that when the rabbi judged the man for being ugly, he went global on it. He didn't just judge the man for being ugly. He said, your whole city must be so ugly. And when the man decided to forgive him, he offered the rabbi the mercy that the rabbi didn't offer to him, which is that he didn't want to judge globally. He didn't want to judge his whole life. He just said, what you did was wrong, but don't get accustomed to behaving that way, as if the rest of his life may not be so ugly. Where he wanted to think that not only is this man ugly, but this entire city is so ugly. And this man didn't even want to think that about the rabbi, which just shows that maybe you don't have to be an elevated scholar to be a beautiful, kind, and forgiving person.
thank you. One of the reasons why I love any opportunity for text study is really hearing so many different voices and so many different perspectives on the same story that we read. For me, when I look at the story this year in particular, one of the things that stands out to me so much is the beginning and ending, the part about the reed and being soft, and then saying that one should not be like a cedar, one should not be so proud that they are likely to sin. Because it makes me think about different pieces of our liturgy and different pieces of Psalms where we see the cedar especially lifted up as something, this symbol of strength for us, a literal column of strength. And here, the story sort of upends that and says to us, actually, the softness, the flexibility is something that is really beautiful and really preferable in different kinds of situations. And it makes me think about the Jewish teaching about Yetzer HaTov and Yetzer Hara, that each of us are endowed with an inclination for good and an inclination for evil. And it can be the same trait. It can be something like strength, something like softness, that really depends on how we channel it. That different situations present us with different ways of channeling so many of our own strengths and so many of our own weaknesses. And part of what I think is beautiful about this story in particular is that it invites each one of us to see that bit of ourselves in the different characters, and also think about what it means to us to channel that softness even in a world that really prizes strength so much, to think, where is the softness within me actually offering compassion this year? Where can I channel that as I enter into my own new year?
Amen. In a moment, we're going to all offer a Shamnu together. One of the things I love about this story is that ugliness is everywhere in this story. No one is perfect in this story. It's much easier for us to find ugliness in other people. And we're living in a time in this country and in the world where it's very easy to find ugliness in someone who's different, has a different perspective. It's much harder for us to actually look in the mirror and realize that we are also not perfect. And I think this high holidays, and right now as we're preparing with Selichot, is our opportunity to really look in the mirror. Yes, we are very good at judging other people. We're excellent at it. We spend less time actually thinking about how we're flawed and the ugly pieces of ourselves that we need to work on. And maybe if we try and work on our own internal beauty, we'll be able to see more of that beauty in the world and bring more of that beauty to light. So I'd like all of you to please rise as Cantor Weiss leads us in a Shamnu.
Ay, ay, ay.
Tatnu.
Tiavnu.
Tiavnu.
Tainu.
Tainu.
Titanu.
Titanu.
Standing. As you notice, the Torahs still have their regular mantles, but as the tradition on Selichot is for us to change those mantles to the purity of the white, just as sometimes on Yom Kippur we dress all in white, and just as right now, tonight begins the chance for us to begin to change our appearance, our look, our internal and our external. And so the Torahs represent physically the work that we must do to bring more purity into our own lives. And so we're going to remain standing as we change the mantles at this time.
We return.
We return.
We return.
We return.
We return. Return again. We return.
We return.
We return.
We return.
We return. Return again and again to true.
We return again to you.
Tova, everybody. My name is Rabbi Leora Albin. I'm from Temple Emanuel, and my colleagues, Rabbi Jonathan Aaron and Cantor Lizzie Weiss, and I are now going to enter into the third section of our evening together, where we will be focusing on the theme of endurance. I remember when I was a kid asking my mom, she's here tonight, asking my mom, what made me a Jew? She explained that Judaism is more than a religion, it's a people. And no matter what you do, you're always going to be a Jew. Okay, I was probably around 8 years old. I didn't really understand what that meant, but okay. We stand tonight on the precipice of another high holiday season, another year for the Jewish people. And what a year we have been through. As others get ready to do their seasonal activities of the fall, maybe apple picking or jumping in fall leaves or drinking pumpkin spice lattes, we get ready to lay our souls bare with the work of teshuvah, creating space to imagine just maybe better selves and a better world to come. Year after year, we engage in this work even when it's hard, even when the world knocks us down, even when it would be so much easier not to be a Jew. Why? Being a Jew means walking along a narrow bridge, not sure what's on either side of this bridge, and not sure if or when the bridge will come to an end. I'm going to share with you an excerpt from an essay by Dr. Daniel B. Schwartz. He's a professor of history and Judaic studies at George Washington University, and in it, he offers one answer of why year after year we come back and we lean into our Judaism. He writes, "The most perplexing element of the history of the Jews is that there are still Jews at all. The philosopher Simon Radidowicz once argued that the fear of the impending demise of Israel, the ever-dying people, is the leitmotif of their history from desert rovings to the catastrophes of the 20th century. The world makes many images of Israel, he wrote, but Israel makes only one, that of being constantly on the verge of ceasing to be." Last night I was just having a conversation with an Israeli, and she looked me straight in the eye. This is a true story. She looked me straight in the eye and she said, "Rabbi, what do you make of the future of the Jewish people?" So it's a very live question, obviously. But even if a tendency toward worry is deeply embedded in the Jewish collective psyche, the resilience of Jewishness across millennia of upheavals, displacements, dispersions, persecutions, and assimilatory pressures and violence to the point of attempted annihilation is something of a conundrum. All things are mortal but the Jew, Mark Twain wrote in 1898. All other forces pass, but he remains. What is the secret of his immortality? So Daniel B. Schwartz continues, 25 years ago this fall, when I began my doctoral studies at Columbia, I took my first seminar with my late mentor, the historian Yosef Chaim Yerushalmi. The class was about 16th century Jewish historiography, but in reality, it focused almost exclusively on one book from that period, Solomon ibn Verga's Shevet Yehuda. Near the end of our semester-long reading of Shevet Yehuda, we came upon a passage that appeared to grab Yerushalmi the most. Ibn Verga claims to have heard from elders among the Spanish exiles about a horrific tragedy. A plague had broken out on a ship on which many of the exiles were traveling. The captain responded by forcing the exiles ashore in a desolate area. Most of them died of starvation, while the remaining few began walking in search of settlement. Their ranks included one unnamed Jew together with his wife and his 2 sons. In the course of their trek, first his wife died, then he and the sons that he was carrying, they all fainted, and when he awoke, he found his sons dead, utterly bereft. He arose in his tiredness and his starvation, and he declared, Lord of the universe, although you are doing much to make me abandon my religion, know for certain that despite the heavenly hosts, a Jew I am, and a Jew I will remain, and nothing you have brought or will yet bring upon me will help you. The Job-like story ends with the man burying his sons with some earth and grass and embarking once again on his search for an inhabited place. But here again, we bump up against the riddle that was described above. Why? Why did this particular Jew, after all of the cruelty and all of the agony that he had endured, culminating in the death of his entire family, resolve in that moment of his despair to carry on as a Jew? Why were those the words that he declared? The steadfastness of this unnamed Spanish Jewish exile is rooted in a blunt truth. A Jew I am, and a Jew I will remain. It is something visceral, instinctive, something that stems not from reason, not even from faith, but from the kishkis. It is as though for this man to be a Jew is to survive, and there is no survival if not as a Jew. Perhaps it is this core intuition, a preconceptual understanding that lies beyond the reach of explanation or justification, preceding any talk of flexibility and adaptability. And that remains, that brings us nearest to the nucleus of resilience in Jewish history, and those of us who carry this embodied spirit, us Jews, all of us tonight, all of us about to enter into the new Jewish year together. We are its atoms.
Kol ha'olam kulo gesher tsar me'od. Rabbi Albin referred to this phrase, the whole world is a very narrow bridge. Written first by Reb Nachum of Breslov in the late 18th century, this concept that the whole world we're all on this very, very narrow bridge with so many things that keep us scared. It still resonates today. And although I don't know that Reb Nachum of Breslov thought that one day there'd be a young woman named Alana Arian who would write a beautiful melody that would resonate, tonight his spirit is going to be sung through her beautiful melody. And I encourage you, it's on the back of your sheets, to sing with me. Kol ha'olam kulo
Gesher tsar
One or two more times together. Kol haolam kulo, kol haolam kulo, gesher tzar, gesher tzar me'od. Kol haolam kulo, kol haolam kulo, gesher tzar, gesher tzar me'od.
Somehow being Jewish is like walking on a narrow bridge? Perhaps. In the Middle Ages, there was a book of midot, which are like moral characteristics. Took a course with Eugene Borowitz, who had an extremely deep voice, the only person I've ever known that could say the word alas, and it would sound like a normal word. He had us study this book, and the chapter that I had to study with classmates was Boshet Panim, which really translated as like an embarrassing face. This was a positive value. I cringed with every suggestion of how a Jew should exist in the world. Keep your head down. Don't make eye contact with people. Don't talk too loudly. Speak in hushed tones and cross the street if someone's coming towards you. This was the Jew of the Middle Ages. Why? It was because it was like being on a very, very narrow bridge. You couldn't move. You were stuck in place. And you didn't want to make too big of a footprint, otherwise you might bring calamity upon yourself. And in many ways, the calamity came to us anyway. Calamity has befallen all of our people, and one of the reasons why resilience, endurance is one of the things we wanted to talk about is it feels like right now we're in an existential crisis, but we will endure because we are a resilient people, and we have been here before. Generation after generation after generation has experienced anti-Semitism, even before it was called that. And this year, since October 7th, I felt like a victim. I imagine that each of us might have felt at one time or another during this year a little bit helpless, hopeless, like a victim. And I think what's been so frustrating to me is that the Jewish people over this year, even though we might feel like a victim, have all of a sudden become the villain as opposed to the victim. So, on that theme of the idea that we have survived before, we're going to go back 80 years or so to the Holocaust. And if you want to take a look at the second reading on the back of the page, there's a reading that was written by Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, of blessed memory, about Edith Egger, Holocaust survival. So I'll read this I'm going to go slowly because there's a couple of moments that should be pointed up. But I think this can help us this year. Suffering, Edith Egger, the Holocaust survivor, says in her book, is universal. But victimhood is optional. There's a difference, she said, between victimization and victimhood. All of us are likely to be victimized at some stage. We will suffer abuse. We will suffer injury, ill fortune, or failure. We live exposed to forces beyond our control. Victimization comes from the outside, but victimhood comes from the inside. No one can make you a victim but you. We develop a particular kind of mindset, a way of thinking and being that is rigid, blaming, pessimistic, stuck in the past, unforgiving, punitive, and without healthy limits or boundaries. We become our own jailers. Perhaps we're as stiff as cedar at that moment. Victimization comes from the outside, often in the form of forces we cannot control, but healing comes when we refuse the self-definition of victim. There is always a choice. Often we cannot choose what happens to us, but we can always choose how to react. I'm going to read that again. Often we cannot choose what happens to us, but we can choose how to react. We are never defined by events. To allow ourselves to be so defined is to hand sovereignty over our own lives to others. Choice is one of the fundamental themes of the book of Deuteronomy. As a matter of fact, this morning we read this exact phrase. This day I call the heavens and earth as witness against you that I've set before you life and death, blessing and curse. Now choose life so that you and your children may live. The choice implies Moses is yours, individually and collectively. We cannot choose what happens to us, but we can choose how we respond to what happens to us. The choice between acting well and acting badly, doing good or committing evil is always there. Other people may harm us, but there is always some residue of freedom, something deep within the soul, giving us resilience to live. So in this song we've been singing, Gesher Tzar Ma'od, we are all on a very narrow bridge. But the second part of it says, we're going to sing Lo Lefached Klal. The main thing is, don't be afraid. But I want to introduce you to the actual original version of those words, which isn't Lo Lefached Klal, but Lo Lehitpached Klal. The reflexive verb of being afraid. So it's not, don't be afraid, it's don't make yourself afraid. You might be afraid, but don't let that turn and turn and turn so you get more afraid and more afraid and more afraid, and you make yourself into being frightened. I believe what Edith is urging us to do is don't be making yourself more fearful than you have to be. There are going to be dangerous moments in life. Moments that absolutely are going to bring fear into our hearts. It is scary. It may frighten us, but she urges us to not allow it to just keep churning in our heads, not to let fear grow and take over, and not to let it define us so that we become even more afraid. So we sing together, second half of Gesher Tzar Ma'od.
One more time.
Call
Gesher Tzar, Gesher Tzar
me'od. V'ha'ikar,
V'ha'ikar, V'ha'ikar,
lo lefachet klal.
V'ha'ikar, V'ha'ikar, lo lefachet klal. If we can now get into Rabbi Zoibek position, feet down, sit up on our seats in an assertive position. If you're comfortable closing your eyes, we're just going to take a moment to think about two things that we've been talking about. So if you'd like to just close your eyes for a moment, let's just feel our breath. Feel your body move with your breath. Feel your body in your chair, your feet in the ground. Make it so that you feel like you and the chair are one. Just take a moment to notice the tensions and the places in your body. The places in your body that are feeling narrow, tight. Check in with your shoulders and your neck and your head. See if you can find a nice, relaxed position. Take a moment to think about what it means to say, amidst everything that's happening to the Jewish people. What does it mean to you to say, I am a Jew? How does that sit in your body? What does it do to you to say, I am a Jew? Take some time to keep that inside. I am a Jew. If you're comfortable, you can just say it out loud a couple times, or mouth it, or whisper it. I am a Jew. Where does that take your mind? Where does that take your body? Now as you continue to breathe in the breath of life, perhaps exhaling some tension in your body, let us consider lo lihitpached. Don't make yourself afraid. I think this isn't necessarily there is nothing to fear but fear itself, but more like James Taylor in Secret of Life. It's okay to feel afraid, but don't let that stand in your way. Just take time to think about your fears, how we can move forward, keeping those fears inside of us, letting them inform us, but not letting those fears take over. Let us consider lo litpached klal. Let us not make ourselves afraid.
Sing with us, Rabbi.
So in a moment, we'll hear the shofar sound that calls us to attention at this time of the year. And one of the things I've been thinking a lot about is that teruah, which is a call to war, a call to arms. But on Selichot, I wanted to offer a different thought, a different kavanah for listening to the shofar. Some of you have heard it sounded already during the month of Elul. Maybe for others, this will be the first time you've heard it this High Holy Day season. One of my favorite stories about the shofar is told in the name of the Baal Shem Tov, who lived in the early 18th century. And one of his students was a man named Reb Wolf Ze'ev Kitzis. And there's a lot of stories told about him. He ended up becoming a disciple of the Baal Shem Tov and was a part of many of the stories that are told about him. But there's one story about a shofar that I love, that the Baal Shem Tov had a dream one night, a vision of the truest shofar that was ever blown. And in his vision, this shofar was blown by Reb Ze'ev Wolf Kitzis, his disciple. And so he came to Reb Wolf and he told him, you this High Holy Days, you will blow the shofar at my synagogue, and it will be the truest sound that has ever been heard. It will immediately, upon hearing it, it will open everyone's heart to teshuvah. It will open the very gates of heaven. He said, to prepare for this, in my dream, I came into contact with an angel who told me that I was to teach you all of the mystical meanings of every single blast, every sound, the four main sounds, but they're repeated many, many times over the course of the days, and every time it's sounded, every single tekiah has a different mystical meaning. And so for weeks, he taught these mystical meanings to Reb Wolf, and Reb Wolf took these meticulous notes. He had a whole book filled with the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov, and finally, it came, the time for him to blow the shofar during the shofar road service, Rosh Hashanah, in the Baal Shem Tov's synagogue. And in the morning, Reb Wolf got his shofar and he got everything prepared. He couldn't find the notebook. He couldn't find it. He didn't know where it was, and he was going through the house. He was turning the house upside down, and he comes to synagogue without the notebook. And now he's in an absolute panic, because in his notebook he had written down for every single blast a little kavanah, a little something that was going to make the sound perfect. And it's just gone. And the Baal Shem Tov calls him up, and he starts to call each note. And Reb Wolf is in an absolute despair. He's schwitzing uncontrollably. It looks like he's not well. But when he lifts the shofar to his lips and he blows, the sound is perfect. It's so pure. It's exactly what the Baal Shem Tov saw in his vision. And afterwards, they were sitting together and they were drinking a cup of tea, and the Baal Shem Tov said, my son, you did it. How did you do it? It was so perfect. He said, Rebbe, I have to be honest with you. I left the notebook at home. I was almost having a panic attack. I didn't know if I could get through it. I don't know what happened. I was there. I was so scared. I was so scared I was going to let you down. I was going to let the congregation down. I was going to let God down. I don't know what I was going to do. And the Baal Shem Tov said, and that's why you blew the shofar so perfectly. Because you brought your fear and you brought that sense of trembling before God. And so the sound of the shofar was perfect. Now, I want you to lower your expectations. Because I also do not have the notebook. I forgot it at home. And I'm a little afraid. But it's not going to be that kind of sound. But I love the story because it reminds us that the shofar is meant to really open up a part of who we are, like an essential part of who we are. So if anybody has a shofar, I'm going to invite you to come on up to the bima, bring up your shofar, and are you going to call the shofar, or are you going to blow the shofar? And we'll ask everybody to rise as you're able.
I do have an extra notebook in the back. Do you want that?
What's in it?
I am going to call very loudly the sounds of the shofar. You're going to all repeat it just as loudly so that we can put our energy onto them so that they can sound it. Are you ready? You must repeat it exactly as I chant it to you.
know you've been waiting all night for us to finally sing the words of Avinu Malkeinu. So now's your first chance of the season. Avinu Malkeinu, Choneinu v'Haneinu. Avinu Malkeinu, Choneinu v'Haneinu, Ye'en banu ma'asim, aseh imanu, tzedaka v'chesed, aseh imanu, tzedaka v'chesed, ve'hoshienu. Avinu Malkeinu, Choneinu v'Haneinu. Avinu Malkeinu, Choneinu v'Haneinu, Ki ein banu ma'asim.
Baruch atem bavoachem, baruch atem b'tzeitchem. You were blessed as you came into this house, and may you be blessed as you go forward. Thank you to Wilshire Boulevard, Wise Temple, Temple Emanuel. Thank you all for being here tonight. Shana Tova, may we all return.
We return.
We return.